Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Muslim Glory podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the greatness of the Mali Empire, one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen, the wealthiest nation or empire the world has ever seen, which was run by the wealthiest man the world legit has ever seen. We have these numbers available for inflation adjusted. Mansa Musa, the ruler, was worth about $400 billion. And yeah, that made him the wealthiest man that has ever lived, wealthier than Elon, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Bill Gates, and yeah, many others. So this is a very impressive man, and I think we should all know about this. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about not just what it was in Mali, but also what happened outside of Mali. Because as explained last time, one of the impressive characteristics of these Mali rulers was that they had a lot of respect for knowledge, and that is visible in not just the life of Abu Bakr II, but also Mansa Musa, who was the richest ruler who had ever lived. Okay, we're going to go first to Abu Bakr II because I already mentioned before that he actually went to the Americas. This is something that's been recorded not just in Western history, but also in Eastern history, because the brother who took over the Mali Empire talked about it while in Egypt. In Egypt, scholars have actually registered this. Al-Masudi has registered this in his maps. And yeah, that makes it something that's very well recorded. And so, okay, one of the researchers nowadays who has researched this is actually the professor at King Khalid University in Saudi Arabia. His name is Yahya Sehoudi. And I think he has a specialization in American history, if I'm not wrong. He has written a lot about the Muslim sources as well as the Western sources, which are available, which is really cool, obviously, because he speaks Arabic, so he has access to all of these sources. And that makes his research on this topic very interesting. And I think he has a good mix and match of not just Western knowledge, but also Eastern knowledge. And that's why I like him a lot. There's also some Western professors. One of them is Ivan van Sertima. His book is very easy to get, by the way. It is called like they came to the Africa before the Americans, something like that. I did get his book. I was a little bit disappointed by his book. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like he had a little bit of like Islamophobia. Like he did admit that they were Muslims, but it was like almost like he had a hard time admitting it. And he also talks about how he thinks, some Muslims were not open or friendly towards Black people. And I think that's his main issue with Muslims. But I think that he might have also been heavily influenced by media because he was from the US. I think he worked at Rutgers University, but he has his roots in Guyana. And coincidentally, I mean, I work nowadays in Suriname. I host like a TV show there. And I noticed that there, they definitely have. I feel like they're not the kindest people to Muslims. And I think they're heavily influenced by American media. And some of the reactions I've gotten also when I talked about this on my social media was that people explained that they're also very open to social media information, and that might be information that's not true. So that's something that I learned about, this journey, that there's also these professors who sometimes you can notice that they don't feel very positively towards Islam. But then there's also other professors. One of them is Leo Weiner. He was a professor at Harvard University, and he was a very well-respected university during his lifetime. And he has done a lot of research in North Africa. And he actually, when I read his book about, how Muslims arrived in the Americas before Columbus did, it was very respectful. And he really also, acknowledged all of the achievements of the Muslim world, that they were, definitely more impressive than what they were doing in Europe at that point. And so, I think that's interesting. You notice these subtle differences in between how these professors describe something. And the things they mentioned, for example, even von Sertima felt like it was very important to mention that Muslims didn't like black people per se, which Islamically speaking is not something that is it's not something that Muslims could do. But I don't know what his experience is, of course. Okay, so anyways, those were one of these professors. Then we also have Alexander von Wutenhau. He was a professor at New Mexico University from 1939 till 1965. And basically what he did is he collected a lot of art, terracotta art. I think it was in Mexico, was it? I think it was in Mexico. A lot of them, yeah, were found in Mexico. And this terracotta art actually has a link to the Mali Empire as well, because they found a lot of these heads, like huge heads, which were of black people, because obviously every kind of like group of people around the world, they had very distinct features, and they could tell that these were of African people. And in particular, I think that he also said that it was people from the Mali Empire, because they also found their way of dressing, which they could see like the hats or the jewelry. And so that's what they why they made that connection. It also showed that these people were of high status, because otherwise the people wouldn't make these type of terracotta statues, because usually they would do that to kind of like honor a person, and maybe even take them as their gods, because I believe that that was also the case in Mexico, that they took these people that they made statues of as their gods. And I mean, I do have to say there's a slight connection between the Mali Empire and doing that, because in the Mali Empire there was also these pagan rituals that were sometimes incorporated into Islam to, accommodate, I guess, some of the pagans, which could be then also idolizing, idol worshiping. So yeah, I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed, but not surprised. Okay, then we have the next book, which is by Leo Weiner. And so I have to say, it's really hard to get this book. I mean, I've been to libraries in several countries. I could find it only in Qatar. Yeah, and I thought that was a bit disappointing. It was very hard to find, but he wrote a really cool book. Like, if you look at all the references he used, he definitely went into detail in all these different diaries of all these different explorers. And that made it very intense. Like, he went into like researching names of plants in the Americas. He read books from authors from all around the world, also in many different languages, by the way, which makes it kind of extensive. And I mean, my goal in life would be to be this well researched. And the thing is, people always like kind of like knock his research, saying like, oh, but he was a linguistic or like a professor in linguistics. But I'm like, the reason why he actually found out that Muslims had been in the Americas is because he was studying the language of the natives. And he actually found that their language is more similar to Arabic than it was to another language. That's why he made the connection that Muslims from Africa or somewhere must have been there before. And so, in his book, he also very clearly says that there is a huge arrogance amongst European historians, that they just don't want to admit that Muslims had been in the Americas before, because like the evidence is undeniable. And if I tell you like how extensive his research was, from like books in so many different languages to like the diaries of all these different explorers in different languages, to going into like names of plants, to also prove that they had Madingo roots, this wasn't nothing, right? But one thing that he does mention is that the petroglyphs, which are these incurvations in rocks, that they should be studied more, because obviously that was not his that was not something that he looked further into, because he was so consumed with all of these linguistic similarities between Arabic and the language of the natives in America. And so, but that is something that Barry Fell did. He did look into the petroglyphs in the rocks that were found all over the Americas, North, Canada, South. And Barry Fell is one of those researchers at Harvard who was well respected during his lifetime. I mean, the fact that they now talk badly about him after he already died and after this man already did his work, It's very shady in my opinion. Like this man was like broadcasted on TV. He had his own museum. He was like in many different communities and commissions and boards in the US. So you're not gonna tell me that nowadays when he's dead, people are like, oh no, he was a bad person. He was not a real historian. Like it doesn't make sense because he did a lot for the community. And so basically, he found some of these really interesting things, like these incurvations in rocks, for example, like all over US, where he found that actually the explorers from probably Africa were teaching Arabic, religion, navigation, mathematics to the natives in the US in Kufic Arabic script. But he also found something else that I thought was really cool because he found that when the missionaries came from Europe to teach the natives about Christianity, that they were teaching them in Arabic. They were teaching them the Christianity in the language of Arabic because they knew that these people spoke Arabic and they didn't speak another language. So they had to teach them about Christianity in Arabic. And so like these type of things, like that's just irrefutable proof. So that is something that I think is really cool. The Mandingo tribes are still present in some countries. They're huge. For example, let's see. The people in Panama, Central America, they still have tribes classified as Madinga. But like I said before, Suriname has that as well. There's entire Maron, so escaped slaves, they say, tribes who were Madinga. They had the culture of the Madinga. And Suriname itself also has like plans with the origins of Madingo. And it's possible that they came there as well. Before I said it also on my social media, people got really angry about it. But like there is a lot of proof and research done about this already. I mean, Suriname used to be part of the Carib, and the Carib people, there's also been found connections between the Muslims and the Carib people. So this is not something new. The Arawak as well, the Arawak Indians, the natives, and so Suriname also has Arawak people. So yeah, this is not something that's new, but it's something that some people find very triggering. Okay. Then we're going to talk about Mali, the center of Islamic civilization. And Mali, I feel like, is often overlooked. I mean, I also was checking out, I usually check out, a new region in several different books to see what all these different books say about this country that I want to talk about. And usually it's like books that have a collection of information about Muslim achievements. Like one is by Ira Lapidus. I usually mention him as well. He has written about Muslim civilizations. I've gotten a lot of information from him, but also I look at the 1001 Inventions. That's one that's really, a good overview of all the different scholars and inventors, explorers from all over the world. I will say from Ira Lapidus, I found a lot of stuff, like really good stuff. Definitely the essentials about Mali were written in there. When I looked at 1001 Inventions, I felt like it was a bit limited because like the only thing I could find, I'm going to be honest, I didn't like really check into detail. I just like went through it to see if any of the pages mentioned Mali. I only saw that they mentioned Sankore University in Timbuktu, which definitely is huge, not gonna lie. Like it's one of the oldest universities in the world and it was massive. 25,000 students were studying there, at a time where Oxford didn't even have 1,000. They had like 500,000 manuscripts, which is similar to like the libraries of Cordoba, similar to House of Wisdom. So we should be keeping them, at that level, like where a lot of people will know about House of Wisdom. Not a lot of people will talk about Sankore University. A lot of people will talk about, the university founded by Fatima Al-Fihya, but not a lot of people will talk about this university, which was also founded by a Muslim woman. It was huge. It was, they had a lot of books, something that I don't think they did in the university that was founded by Fatima Al-Fihya. I'm just going to make a guess because I never read that they had this many books. And so I would say, once again, I do think that there is a little bit of negligence on the part of us Muslims where we do not give African achievements enough importance, I would say. Like this is huge. So yeah, that is something that I think we should talk about. One thing that's really interesting, what I found, by the way, I think it was in the book by 1001 Inventions, is that they said the PhD took about 10 years back then in the country, in that university. And like nowadays, a PhD doesn't take that long, but it does show like the intensity of knowledge. It was also completely different education system, by the way. They had like mentors, one-on-one a lot of one-on-one education, and it was like it sounded way more intense, which just shows like that really made me think like people back then were definitely way smarter, and it also makes sense that they were achieving and inventing such great things, but also that people were, you know, oftentimes polymaths, like they were excelling in multiple fields. And I just don't know how they did it. Like, I don't know how they would sleep. I guess they didn't have social media. Probably that's it. I mean, there's definitely things they were spending their time on, but it's interesting because they also had other things that were very time intensive, like traveling was very time intensive, cooking, cleaning the house. So it's also like, I don't know how they had all that time when there were other things they had to do, which we usually don't have because we have luxuries like vacuum cleaners, washing machines, you know, even cleaners, or, you know, cooking doesn't take so long. You just go to a place and buy it. I don't know. These people were of a different caliber, and I think that's something we definitely need to recognize. So Robert E. Crane, I like to mention him, but he specifically talked about Timbuktu as well. He is the former ambassador to the US in UAE, but he also worked in Qatar at the university. He was an advisor to President Nixon. This is not a small name, but basically he comes from a Cherokee family, and he had the American Muslim magazine, and there he talked very extensively about his life story and how he comes from a very prominent family of Cherokees who were Muslims. Like, I believe they were even imams, and they were trying to fight for the right to maintain Islam. And he, Robert Crane, has obviously done the work as well to research this further, like how many Muslim natives there were, and, you know, how they were suppressed and whether they were still alive. He's also that guy who found that there were Muslims in the 1970s who were still practicing Islam, but they had to hide it from the US government. So just so you know, like, you know, suppressing Islam and actually actively, you know, telling people that they cannot be Muslim, that it was happening not too long ago. But basically, he also said that he wanted to go to Timbuktu to find more about the connection between the Mali Empire and the Muslim natives in the Americas, but that he couldn't get that type of, he needed approval from the government. He couldn't get it because it was too dangerous. But he's also saying that because Timbuktu is under French rule, there's not a lot of access for people to find out what is left of this great university and of all the knowledge they had, which obviously, you know, it's a huge shame. But he does, yeah, he does encourage people, you know, maybe it's not my lifetime, maybe it's your lifetime if you're young, or maybe your children's lifetime, to find out more about this, because this is super cool. Like, I don't know if we're able to find out about this. I did read online, by the way, that they're trying to digitize the collection of books in Timbuktu. I don't know who is overseeing this process and what they're trying to like hide, because I do believe my friend who speaks French, she told me that there's actual articles where French people are advised not to talk about this, and that if they find something about it, that they shouldn't talk about it, like journalists, I believe. And obviously, I've talked about the importance of psychology so much, you know, what it does to a person when they find out about their history of greatness, what it means for their future, and how much power they will be able to hold and the opportunities they will have. It has a huge influence on a person when they know that they have a very impressive history. And so there's a lot of incentive amongst colonizers to hide this, for the people they're trying to oppress. And that's why I think a lot of the Muslims, you know, you need to be very smart about this. You need to be smart about the content and the information you consume, and you need to actively look for places where they will remind you of your greatness so that you walk in this earth differently. That's my advice to everybody. Okay. And like, I mean, there's several, you know, there's many stories where we can tell that a lot of Muslim and Black greatness is being suppressed. Like one is definitely Muslims in Americas before Columbus came. Another one I would definitely say Mali. Another one is the presence of Muslims in Europe, like whether it's with the Scandinavian Vikings or in South Europe where they had the Cordoba Emirate, which was an incredible emirate, an incredible empire, but also all of the achievements, obviously, of like Middle Eastern inventors, innovators, explorers. Those are suppressed. Another one I came along very recently was a king in the UK who was Black. His name is King Ofa, and basically the UK does not really talk about. I've never heard about this. You know, like he exists. Like you can find many credible accounts that confirm that he existed, but people don't like to talk about it. But like basically, the UK was ruled by a Black man at some point. And I think this is definitely one of those pieces of information that people don't like to talk about. He apparently had a very, either he was a Muslim or he had a very friendly attitude towards Muslims, because he actually created a coin, a golden coin, which was he called a dirham, and he also put like an Islamic text on it. And, you know, there were no gold coins during his reign, but he only made a gold coin, which, you know, uh, honored Islam. And so that also made it seem like this man might have been a Muslim, you know? But like, you see, one thing is clear. If you're Black, they're definitely going to try to hide your history. If you're Muslim, they're definitely going to try to hide your history. If you're a Black Muslim, they're definitely going to hide your history. And that's why I think Black people in general, like I really, you know, I feel a lot of allyship to Black people, because I think their struggle is similar to that of Muslims. But especially for Black Muslims, I think that they are suffering a great struggle. And I really want to say to all Muslims, you know, to always protect your Black brothers and sisters, to make sure that you hold their name high when they're not present. In their absence, you hold their name high. When people talk badly about them, you hold their name high. You know, whether they are Muslim or not, you need to make sure that these people are protected. And like, this is a direct command from our prophet, from Allah. You know, Allah said in the Quran that, you know, Black people are not less than white people. You know, our prophet, peace be upon him, said it in his final speech. Black people are not less than white people, and we are a brotherhood, and we need to be one, you know. And so that's why this is something, it's just a no-brainer. It's just no argument. Like, if they are the ones who are being marginalized right now, then it is up to those who are stronger to fight that oppression for them. So yeah, this is something I do feel very passionate about, because I don't know, I've seen a lot of discrimination against Black people, and I think it's really wrong. I think it's really wrong. And I think that the more you marginalize them, the more you talk down on them, the more you take away their opportunities to become greatness. And we should never be the one, you know, causing something like that, to take the livelihood of entire families, of children, you know, of parents who want to provide for their children, and that we break them down to the point where they cannot. Like, that is something we really need to work on. And so I've said this before, you know, Candace Owen, you know, she talked about how important it is to not really focus too much on all of this, like the negative kind of like position of people in a society. What is better for them is to actually remind them of the greatness they've achieved. And yeah, so that is something, let me see, where was I? Oh yeah, that is something that I really want to, give you a reminder of as well. Right now, the Mali Empire obviously fell following the death of Mansa Musa. The entire empire wasn't able to survive because they had probably like bad leadership. And at some point, you know, colonizers came in, occupied the area, and that's why it doesn't exist anymore the way it does. You know, there was a lot of like local like chieftains, that's how you call them, like chiefs who were all ruling like smaller parts of the empire, who wanted to become more individualized and independent. And that's every time I tell you this, that's always the start of the downfall of an empire. Happened in Cordoba Emirate, happened in India, it happens everywhere. Okay, right now there's a lot of fights amongst the different tribes or people. Like for example, you have the Tuareg rebels. They're fighting a lot, and so basically, one thing that I think is very interesting is that Russia and Ukraine are actually involved right now in all the issues in Mali as well. I was very surprised to read that. I was like, what do they have to do there? And so basically, but I got an idea about which side I would support if I was like part of it, because I mean, I figured, like Gaddafi, for example, was supporting the Tuareg rebels. But then at the same time, Russia supports them. Look, I'm going to tell you one thing. Like, I grew up in Europe, and in Europe, like, Russians are like complete underdog, and like a lot of propaganda is aimed at them. And like naturally, like being Muslim, like I feel like they're like, our allies then, because they're at the same receiving end of all the nonsense. And I mean, in the US, in Europe, they pay a lot to create like propaganda against Russia, right? But my thing is like, if Russia was really bad, then why would you have to like manipulate people into hating them? Like if they've done bad things, you could just come out and be like, yo, Russia's bad, and so we shouldn't support them. And then people would be like, oh, did they do that? Okay, they did that. Okay, then we don't support them. But the thing, what they do with Russia, and they do it with Muslims as well, is they cannot just pinpoint what they did, right? They always have to make it like a false flag mission. They always have to make it like a movie with like an undertone of Russian hate or Muslim hate. And that to me is just manipulative. Like I cannot trust people when they lie like that, like just be honest and say what's the problem so we can support you. But like Western countries don't do that, and that makes them look super suspicious in my opinion, which is why whenever I read that somewhere Russia is involved, I'm like, probably then that's the good side. Like that's literally how I'm thinking, because I just know that there's so much negativity surrounding them. You cannot trust anything you read about Russians, And also at the same time, like I feel like countries like the US, like I do feel like they have a really like their government just is like very ill-intended. They don't have like a really like a heart for their own people. Like I always say, like in America, in the US, like nobody hates the people of America more than the American government. Like, let's be really honest, the way they poison their people with the FDA, like things that are not allowed to be eaten anywhere in the world, Americans will feed it to their people. Then they have healthcare that literally is just like made to kill their own people or make them more sick. And then if they are sick, to just like make them pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have a prison system that's really made to like make all these owners rich, trying to give kickbacks to judges who put kids into jail. The whole country it's not going well there, And then you have like Trump very recently went on in an interview. He said like Muslims hate Americans. I'm like, yo, you hate Americans. You American leaders hate Americans. And that's one of the reasons why whenever America comes out with like they have a new enemy, I'm like, okay, that must be my friend, because like they're honestly not being good to their own people or the world. That's how I see it. That's something that's very disappointing about them. And so in the case with Russia, I always feel the same way when they're saying shit about Russia. I'm like, probably that's not true. And it's very hard because you want to find out the truth, but then I don't speak Russian. I cannot find sources. And then like you just have no choice, That's the problem we have. But just one thing, I think like governments need to stop gaslighting their people, because they're like talking very like when you're lying. For example, like the US has a lot of negative propaganda about Russia, but they also have a lot of negative propaganda about Muslims. It's like when you're lying to your people so much, you don't want to tell them the truth about people. Like you literally just like gaslight them, which like psychologically it really gets to people when you tell them, oh, okay, so we are going to take out these people by the dozens, but then at the same time you're going to tell them, oh, but apart from that, we are not allowed to kill. Like that really messes up people. And I think that's also very visible in the American people, because like they're taught that it's okay to take out anyone who's Russian, anyone who's Muslim, even if it's a child, even if it's a mother. But then when it comes to their own society, they're like, oh, no. You cannot do that to your own people. And then the result is that these people are, treating their own people like crazy, like they're doing mass shootings, school shootings here and there, because like you're telling them in one way that it's okay to kill people, but then at the same time you tell them it's not. What do you think is gonna happen? And that's why I think that, like American society is kind of like sick, mentally kind of sick. Like I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. Like I generally think they have a lot of mental illness. Like every video that's like funny about Americans is always someone having like a mental breakdown or like an episode in public, and then people are like recording it and think it's funny. It's not funny. Like even the lady who went from the US to Pakistan and then she had like a mental episode. Her son said she's mentally unwell. Like she was having a mental breakdown in public. People recorded that like crazy and started like sharing that. I'm like, why would you do that? Like she literally was mentally unwell, which is like super common in the US. And then people make a joke out of it. And I'm like, how is she ever going to get a job if everybody shared that video of her and like maybe one day she'll get better, but then she won't be able to get a job? Like as Muslims, we absolutely are not allowed to laugh at that. Like it's just like there's no excuse to laugh at that. And then some people were not just laughing, they were like actively spreading it, making more jokes about it. It's like, are you not afraid of Allah? Like, what are you doing? Like, we know better. But I think those are really good examples of like the US. Like, it's just mentally deteriorating, and it's just a joke to everyone, but it's not a joke. We should take it that bit serious. Anyways, that was the end of my podcast. This was the Muslim Glory podcast. My name is Raisa Ghazi. If you want to become a public speaker like me and work all around the world, travel everywhere, so you can also do keynotes on something that you are very passionate about, then make sure to sign up for the Speak Out course. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so you will never miss an episode or other content that I upload. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, inshallah.